Hello, everybody. Super excited to be here today with Ashli St. Armant, and I have been counting down the days until I get to talk to her. So, welcome to the
Thank
Heritage,
you so much.
video. I don't even know. I can't even say podcast, but just videos and things I like to do when I get to talk to interesting people. So, I would love to be able to tell my audience more about you and to introduce you. I'm excited to introduce you to them. Can you tell us a little about yourself and who you are?
Yeah, I'm Ashley St. Armand, and I'm in family programming. So I do lots of things under that hat, I guess you could say, or wear many hats. I'm a vocalist, I'm a playwright, I'm an author. I get on stage and sing songs for kids with my band. I write an audiobook series. I wrote a musical. I really just love to make programming for families to share together, intergenerational audiences, so to speak. And I really like to highlight Black families and Black life in a positive light, both past and present.
Okay. Oh, wow, I love that. I love your elevator pitch. That's so good because I wouldn't have been able to describe it. I'm like, oh my gosh, she does everything. What do I
I've
say?
had to work. I've had to work on that for a long time because it's hard to list all the things. I don't just say
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I'm an engineer." I don't have a
Right.
very like clear cut job like
Yeah,
that.
you have like a portfolio career kind of many
Oh, I
different
like that.
things. Yes, fancy. Well, I really loved the idea that so much of your work, really all of it that I've interacted with, has been joyful and has shown even some of it a lighthearted side to childhood for Black children when so much of what they receive, it's either silence where they're not seeing anything about themselves or their family or the people, or it's only the negative sides. And not just the hard stuff, because I'm a big believer that hard doesn't have to mean bad, but
Right.
it's hard and it's negative. It kind of leaves you feeling like, okay, that dragged us down, dragged down the mood. But I just love that so much of what you're doing even touches on hard things, but always ends in joy. And shows the hope and the determination and all of these things. So let's kind of dig into that. Tell us first about my first interaction with you is through the book. And we'll talk about that a little later. But then the next thing I saw was your band. So tell us all about that. It's exciting.
Yeah, and just to touch on what you said, I'm so glad that you caught that from my work because that has been really the ethos of everything I do, is to highlight the celebration of Black life and Black childhood. Because I remember being a kid and not experiencing that, especially in school, and only learning the hard stuff. And I totally agree with you. The hard stuff is important, but it's not the whole story. So I'm really about telling a holistic version of what it means to be Black in America. And to help audience experience that and to leave feeling proud of that. Um, so yes, I started my band. We're celebrating our 10th season together. We've been together for 10 years. We're called Jazzy Ash and the Weeping Lizards, and I'm Jazzy Ash. Um, and yeah, it started out and still is a band that's about celebrating jazz and jazz history. We do a lot of performances in public spaces like um, the Lincoln Center for Jazz in New York, and festivals like, for example, Austin City Limits has Austin Kitty Limits. So a lot of these major festivals have family stages now, so we do shows like that. And then we also do shows for student audiences. So school children come in when they call like a bus in program, and they come and learn about jazz history through our band while we sing songs and interact with them. So we've been doing that for about 10 years, and it is so much fun. And we do a wide range of programming with that, original songs that I wrote myself to like classic jazz songs. And then we sing like a bunch of silly songs that are like in a jazz style. And so we really get kids up and dancing, but we also teach them about what it means to be a band, what it means to celebrate jazz, and also what it means to be an excuse me, not interracial, but uh, multicultural band
Yeah.
that comes from different backgrounds, and how that would have been illegal 60 years ago, and that
Mm,
jazz musicians were pioneers of change, um,
yeah.
which is really exciting to share. And so I get really interesting letters from kids that are like, I learned about segregation and the saxophone today. And I'm like, I think I did my job. And then like they draw a picture of me like in a stick mode. So I really worked hard to like find that fine line where students are learning something that's engaging and approachable, but not, you know, too heavy where they're like, okay, that was traumatic. I'm not about trauma. I'm about kids learning about stuff that, again, they feel proud of.
Yeah. I love that idea of feeling proud because I agree with you. When I was in school, that wasn't something, if anything about Black people came up, it was probably just going to be about slavery. It was going to be a quick mention as the only Black girl in the room all the time. I would kind of feel like,
Yes.
oh gosh, like everyone's turning around looking at me, not in a mean way, but just like they say slave and everyone turns and looks at me like almost like, is she okay? Or somehow
Yeah.
associating that with me. And as a kid, even as a teenager, like I don't know what to do with that. You know what I mean? I'm
Yep.
like, I don't know why you're looking at me. I don't have anything to say or add to this conversation. And
I had
so
the
the
same
idea,
exact experience. Yeah. And for me, there were some mean things that were said. I remember in junior high specifically, I had a white teacher, and I think he meant well, but he didn't know how to teach a classroom full of kids who were of different backgrounds, but I was the only Black kid. And he was a white teacher. And then he just put on the movie Roots with like no context whatsoever. And right after class, after a very traumatic experience of watching Roots with my non Black classmates, I got called
Mhm.
a racial slur by my classmate. And I never forgot that. And then, years later, my classmate ended up being my waiter at a restaurant, and I was like fully grown adult with kids, and my heart sank right back to 12 years old, and I just was like,
Wow.
oh no, and I was like, I want to change that narrative for kids
Yeah.
in the future where they learned about this topic, but it's not like, oh no, we're going to talk about Black people now, like that
Yes.
that they raise their heads up and say, okay, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Um,
That it feels exciting,
yeah,
and
exactly.
something that you want to learn more about. I think that's really great. And your story there points to the power of words. Words are very powerful. So,
Yeah.
um,
And so,
I
yeah, with
love,
jazz, like I love, I'm sorry, but I love singing
no,
jazz because, like, first of all, people associate jazz in New Orleans with like adulthood, and I've really carefully curated music that is appropriate for young audiences, but also like jazz celebrates all kinds of emotions and playfulness and all these sorts of things, and to point to that music that was made in a time where Black folks were going through an incredible amount of trauma and fighting for their rights. They also were making all these playful songs about like silly things like
yes,
what they had for dinner or like who they were in love with, and like playground songs and stuff like that. And I just find that really fascinating and speaks to our stick to itiveness and our
yes.
durability.
Yeah, and that the idea that even in the midst of like kind of pervasive hardship, that you can still smile. And
Yeah,
there are moments that you can capture joy even in amid anything really. And I feel like that's very, I mean, of course, I'm not going to compare the things we go through today in any way to what was happening in the past, but I know that we all still have hardships and hard times, but yet, you can also laugh heartily at a joke or with a good
yeah.
friend or something, even when you're kind of at your lowest. So I think that's really good explanation of that. So what made you start a band?
So I grew up in a daycare home. My mom had a daycare in our house and was always doing like kids music and stuff. And so I was a weird teenager where everybody was like singing what was on the radio. I was singing like Barney songs in high school because it was like always in my head. So that was like
Yeah.
kind of in my pocket, but it was never something I necessarily wanted to pursue.
Right.
Um, but I did in high school fall in love with musical theater and with jazz. And so I was singing jazz and performing in musical theater in and out of school at an early age. And I went to a performing arts high school. So my goal was to go to Broadway. Like that was what I was going to do. And then in college, I had a baby. And so I left school to raise my son and then had another baby. So that was like my whole world for a long time. And then I got into an age where I wanted to pursue something like a career. And so I kind of had my eyes open to what was possible. And my mom had closed her daycare and started doing preschool music classes. And so she was like, I think you'd be really good with this because you have like your vocal performance background, you play like ukulele, you love music, and you have these babies that you could probably bring with you to work. So I thought, oh, that's a good idea. So I started doing that and really noticed that, the market for family music was really narrow. Some of my best friends in the world are musicians who are white guys with guitars. So no shade to white guys with guitars, but that was pretty much all that there was out there, save a few musicians who were doing something different and trying to fight for change in that particular time of our history. And so I started doing preschool music classes, which evolved to me writing songs, which evolved to me starting a band. And even when I started my band, I was just doing like general children's music. And I went to this incredible conference that actually was the last time they ever had that conference,
Wow.
called Kindie Fest. So Kindie is a term we use in children's music world, like kids music by independent artists, Kindie.
Okay.
Um, so the last Kindie Fest, they talked about, you'd have to find your niche. It can't just be kids music. It's like, what is your thing? And so I was like, oh, I wonder if anybody's doing jazz for kids. And so I went down that route and I put a band together with the help of my friend who was a jazz musician. And it's right away sold like hotcakes because, first of all, we're a
Wow.
really good band, but also
Yes.
there were very few people, as I mentioned, out there who were people of color in children's music at that time. Thankfully, that's changed a lot over the last few years.
Mm.
But at that time, that was true. And also, a lot of women make music for kids, but wouldn't be willing to travel. So I was a traveling musician, like in a female fronted band and a woman of color and doing a different music style. So I feel like there was a big market for that. Um, and I didn't know until that conference that people were actually making money doing kids music full time, like on the road. I didn't know that there was a Grammy category specifically for children's music, which is totally a thing. And actually, I just got off the phone with my Grammy Award winning friend multi times over. So
Wow. Wow.
it's pretty amazing. Yeah, these days I usually know everybody who's been nominated and the winner of the Grammys in that category because family music is actually a beautiful community of friends who are beyond just work colleagues. We really do love each other and believe in making a new kind of music for families that means something and isn't just ABC's one, two, threes.
Yeah.
Which no shade to that music either, but we're talking about real stuff and we don't dumb it down and we're just all really dedicated to making something that kids can relate to but also doesn't diminish who they are as humans. And I
Mm.
really believe that kids can have a range of emotions and can uh, have a lot on their minds, and so we make music about all kinds of things. And anyways, I'm so proud of this community and it's been really awesome to be on the road and meet kids in person and like see little black girls like grab the bottom of my skirt and be like, I never knew somebody like me could be on stage and do this, you know.
Yeah. No, it's phenomenal. I think it's amazing what you're doing and the dedication. And then just, for you to say how many years you've been at this, I think a lot of times it's easy to look at where someone is and what they're doing and like, oh, wow, I can't believe they get to do that without looking at the path or the journey that,
Yeah.
they took to get here. So that sounds really amazing. When you talk about community, I feel like that kind of leads into the Ordinary Folks Project. Can
Sorry,
you,
there's
oh,
a
a
fire. I don't know if you
siren?
can hear it. It's a
Oh,
siren. It's
that's
okay.
okay. That's okay. I'm in semi-rural Georgia, so no sirens over here. But that I feel like the talking about community kind of leads into the Ordinary Folks Project. If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Actually, I have my stack. I just took a photo of it that I might put on Insta later today, but this is my stack of books that I'm about to start reading. I'm so excited. I love
Wow, I
reading
have that
books.
one, the really thick folktales, African American folktales one.
Oh,
I have
yes.
that one. Yeah, I've
Oh,
done a lot
wow.
of work with that. Yeah, it's so good. Oh my
I
gosh,
haven't
it's
had a
so
chance to
good.
dig yet. I've been looking at this stack for months. So today is the day I get to crack them open. I'm so excited. It's like Christmas.
Yeah.
Um, but the Ordinary Folks Project is just getting started, if you can see here. Um, but my idea is to dig through the anthology of Black folk tales and folklore and find the golden nuggets and then turn those tales or that lore into song and then string those songs together to make a musical and under a common theme. And I'm really excited about that because, you know, just like with jazz, these are our personal treasures. And just like our history, these are our personal treasures and our stories. But as Black folks, we tend to shy away from them because it represents trauma. It represents things that have been used to diminish our culture or make fun of us, in blackface and things like that, especially our folk tales. But this is the way that we have told our story, and this is the way that we pass on our legacy to children. And if we lose this stuff, then we lose our history, and we lose our sense of community, and our thread to our ancestors. And so I really want to revive these and reclaim them, because thankfully there have been historians and anthologists, that's not a word, folklorists,
Mhm.
who have collected a lot of this work in the past. So we do have books
Mhm.
like you've mentioned, the annotated American folk tales collected by
Mhm.
Henry Louis Gates, who's a person of color, a black
Mhm.
person who cares about our particular history and comes within our culture. But most of this stuff was collected by people who don't come from our culture, and sometimes to make fun of us,
Yeah.
and to tamp down the importance of this work. And so I think it's time that we kind of reclaim it, and then also present it to other Black folks who, again, just like with my, with jazz and my musical, which we'll talk about, I want, and the history that we've talked about in schools and in history books, I want us to think about Black history, Black folk tales, Black folklore, Black culture, and smile and think this is something to be proud of. And so I'm really interested in presenting this material in a new way.
Mm.
Um, I look to people like Harry Belafonte as inspiration. We think of songs like Deo, and people are like, Deo, they're like, get the maracas out,
Yeah.
and I'm sure he's proud of that too.
Yeah.
But I actually got a chance to see him speak several years ago, but just, a few years before he passed.
Mhm.
And I got to ask him questions from the audience, and I got to ask the last question, and I was like, why folk music? And he's like,
Mm.
there's no greater treasure than our collection of folk music. And so Deo is a folk song. It's a
Yes.
worker song, about
Yep.
the difficulty of being forced to work in this way. But then also they made songs out of it to make light of their situation and to keep them going. And that's something that we can share to audiences of all kinds, but also as a culture that we can look back at that and say, look what we endured and look what we did. We made art out of these really difficult times. I find that so fascinating.
I think that's beautiful. And it's funny because as a homeschooler, a lot of my followers, readers, friends are other homeschoolers. And there's a large percentage of us who incorporate folk songs formally into our homeschool curriculum. So in the
Oh,
morning,
wow.
at the breakfast table, and we've done that as that type of reclamation, and also with the understanding that if we're not teaching our kids those songs or exposing them to people who are singing those songs, they're not going to learn them, they're not going to know them. And that it
Yeah.
is such a gift and it is a treasure. So I just think that is just another cool thing about the work that you're doing. And I just have to tell you this, okay, that big, huge, humongous book. The first time when I first got it, I just dove right into the stories. And I had had it for probably 2 years before I went back and read like the introduction and forward or whatever. It's like a whole bunch of pages in the front, gold. So I'm recommending start in the beginning. Don't skip it. Don't skip to
Yeah.
the stories like I did because there's
I'm
just the discussion. Oh my
I'm
gosh, it's
about
so
10 pages
rich.
into the intro, and I want to peek so bad. And that
I
there
know.
was a part in there, they're like, some people are going to want to peek. And I was like, dang it. I felt so
Yes.
red.
Yes. It's
But
totally
truly,
true.
like, that's the part that is so fascinating to me. And that's the enriching part. So yeah, I'm really fascinated about that. And I'd love to know what folk songs you're singing around the table in your community. So maybe we should talk about that later, because
Okay,
that's
I definitely
really
will.
exciting.
Well, it's gonna be Jazzy Ash now, but we're gonna be seeing some good stuff there from you. But yeah,
Actually, and we don't have to talk about this like in terms of,
yeah,
you can cut this later, whatever. But I worked with this company called Yoto. Do you know Yoto?
no, but I
Um,
saw that you did. I listened to samples on the website though.
oh, okay, yeah.
I wasn't familiar with them though, but I saw that you had redone these songs in
Playground songs,
such a
yeah. So
sweet
that's
way.
that's part of it too. Like we have this rich history as Black girls specifically,
Yes.
over the last 100 years, making all these very intricate, very interesting, fun songs on the playground. And if you think about it, this is a lot of songs made by kids who didn't have access to formal music education, but they're making these songs that have like, there's one. Did you ever doing slide?
Oh, yes, hand clap and all the things.
Yeah.
Yes.
So slide, you can't actually write it down in music form. Like my
Mm,
my musician who I performed that with, um, we go on the road, like he just had to notate how he's going to play it because you know, for his own brain, because you
Yeah.
actually can't put it on sheet music. It's so
Wow.
intricate, and so it doesn't follow a time signature. And I just find that so fascinating that we naturally come up with these really interesting ways and rhythms to express ourselves. And
Yes.
yeah, so it's like a niche way of looking at, you know, Black folk history, which is really cute
But
and fun.
also, again, bringing back that joy, right? So I remember reading, there was a novel, it's an adult novel, it's called Yellow Crocus. And in it, there was a situation. Oh, I'm going to get so far off. So, but the point is that there was the area on this plantation or whatever where the slave quarters were, and somehow the little girl from the big house ended up over there looking for her, essentially her mammy. And everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, she can't be over here. What's she doing here? Whatever." She wouldn't leave. She's a little girl, and so she was kept entertained by hand claps. Like by the rhythms, the rhymes, the hand and all of that. So thinking back
Yeah,
all the way to those times when you don't have music and you don't have instruments and um you don't have anything, you literally have nothing, that you could still make something incredible and something
yeah.
that would make people smile. So I thought that was really
Yeah,
very, very cool.
I just finished a study guide on that very topic about how far that goes back. It goes all the way back to West African traditions of hand clapping rhythms and how they thought that they could tamp us down because they were afraid from the beginning that we were using music as code, which we were.
Yes.
But they were like, if they can't bring their instruments and they can't, you know, share their language, then this is, you know, the way to keep them down. But we already had this innate way to keep rhythm even in our own bodies.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's been a tradition of ours for a long, long time, and we never lost it. So even
It's
though
like
little
the
girls on playgrounds don't like know that, you know, on an
yes.
academic level, we know it in our
Yes.
bodies, which I find so
Yes.
fascinating. Yeah.
It's really true. It's a beautiful thing. I think it's like that. I had read about that, the patent juba, I think they called
Yeah.
it, where they're like,
Yep.
you're using
Yep.
your body as an instrument. And
Yep.
I was like fascinated by that as well.
Yeah.
So that's
We
so cool.
recorded the song Hambone, which is the other word for Juba. And
Yeah.
I invited my friend, another children's music artist, Uncle Devin, to come in the studio. I have a video I'll send to you. And he's tapping so fast that when people hear it and don't see it, they're like, how many people are clapping on this record? And I'm like, just the one. And they're like, wait, what?
Wow.
Like, it is so fascinating. It's a complete musical skill that
Oh
I
my
don't have, by
gosh.
the way.
Yeah, I know. I totally want to see it. I totally want to see it. It's the same thing I see with people like playing spoons, or doing things like taking things that I would look at and be like, you have nothing to make music with right now, and creating stuff that's fascinating and fabulous in all the
Yeah,
ways. So
that's what
just
we do.
again, I feel like the number one theme for our talk today is going to be these strains of tying Black history to joyful moments. And I,
Yep.
I I just don't see that happening very often. And it's actually something I've complained a lot about in my work, that
Yeah.
I feel that the stories are either silent and absent, or they're very one dimensional. And so I'm just so excited about the work they're doing. So tell me about this musical. It's called North. And I will admit, as I was researching it, I was going all in, and I already shared with you before we started recording. The first thing I did was like, when's it coming to Atlanta? Because I'm dying to see it. All the imagery I've seen, anything that I've seen from it has just been so fascinating. But as somebody who's not in theater, I'm like, what is Ashley doing? I'm like, is she directing it? Is she write the music? Is she in it? I just see your name associated with this fabulous project. So tell us what it is and how it's related to you.
Yeah, well, I did most of the things you said.
Okay.
North is I'll give you the elegant I can't give you the elevator pitch if I can't speak. North is a musical about a teenage boy and his mom and their journey through the Underground Railroad. And as you have pointed out, I'm all about the joy. And so this musical is not about slavery, even though it takes place in the antebellum South during slavery times. And obviously, they're escaping from slavery. It's more about their relationship and about relationships as a whole, especially relationships between Black folks and all the different ways in which Black folks lived at that time. Because as you just said, there's a lot of language around the Black experience being one dimensional. And there's so many ways to live as a Black person. It always has been true. And this show starts in a town called Vacherie, which is outside of New Orleans, which is where my ancestors lived and were enslaved and moved then over generations into New Orleans and then out from there. And so the experiences of Black folks specifically in that area have always been really, really fascinating. And I went to I didn't know where I was going to start this musical in terms of the setting, but I knew I wanted to write about the Underground Railroad because my experience learning about slavery was limited, and so was my experience with my children. I talked to them years ago during Black History Month. What do you know about Underground Railroad? And they were like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Oh, what? Not me,
Yeah.
not my
Yeah.
children." And then they were sort of like, "Oh yeah, I heard of that. Like, is it really underground?" And like, all this stuff. And I was just like, and then they knew about Harriet Tubman, and that was it. And
Yeah.
so I was like, there's an opportunity for an education. I don't think I realized that there was an education to be had for me too. And
Mm.
so I thought, I just want to tell this story in the broader sense. But then I went to Vacherie for the first time working on another project. And I was like, well, what is there to do here? And it's a really small town. And the popular thing to do there is to go to visit a plantation. So I was like, well, this will be an interesting experience. And I had an incredible experience and really met my ancestors on that trip. And I've never been a woo woo person at all.
Mm.
I've never
Mm.
ever said anything like that, but I felt physically pressed to tell their story after I went to this plantation and really started to be open to learning not only about Black history in that time in general, but about my story and about my ancestors. And since then, almost I would say in a magical way, information started coming to me and I started learning about all the different ways in which Black folks have lived their lives and how those people are related to my story. And learned how vast that story is. So I got William Still's Underground Railroad book, which is all these accounts, of
Yeah.
ways in which people escaped, and it's so vast and so different. And some of them are really traumatic, and then some of those stories are actually kind of funny.
Yeah.
Like Henry Box Brown, you're like,
Yeah.
what? Why didn't I learn
It's like,
about
I'm just
Henry
gonna
Box
maim
Brown?
myself. Yeah.
Wait, and not only that, but like then he took the box to London and turned it into a magic show. Like, come on, nobody told me about that was happening with Black folks. Nobody was doing magic. I didn't know that.
Right.
You
Right.
know, but that in New Orleans also that there were free women of color who were owning property all the way back to the 1700s, and that there were people like Maroons. I had never heard the word Maroons before, but learning that there were people who were building communities out in the bayous after their
Yeah.
escapes, and fascinating tales like that. And I got a book called Slavery's Exiles from someone who said you should learn about Maroons, and then I cracked the book open to the chapter on Louisiana, and I learned about this man named Tam the Brave, who was a leader in a Maroon community, and he was enslaved on the Saint Amant plantation. So this was an account from the 1780s. But I'm like, my great uncle Tam, hey, how you doing? Like, I didn't know you existed. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
still, can't trace it bloodline all the way back because of what
Yes.
happened to us. But I believe
Yes.
like he wanted me to tell his story. So, anyways, people like Tam and other people that I read about became part of the narrative of North. So, most of them in an indirect way. So, I took these two main characters and implemented some of these stories that I had read into their storyline. And then other people like Tam the Brave is an actual character in the show. And also telling about folks who were not Black who supported
Yeah.
our journey and why, like people like Quakers, for example, and
Yeah.
presenting them in ways that, again, were not traumatic. Like our Quaker is played by one of our female actors in a wig and a hat, and she's like all crickety and stuff, and you're
Yeah.
laughing.
Yeah.
But then other scenes are very serious
Yeah.
and mysterious, and I really just wanted family audiences to connect with these characters. I wanted women, no matter what they look like, to identify with the mom. I wanted, little kids to identify with the son because they bicker, right? And he's getting on his mom's nerves, and he just wants to be a man, and she's not listening to him. And like these are things we
Yeah.
can relate to. And so when the show ends and an audience of sixth graders stands up and claps wildly for my main character, and I know in that moment that they've forgotten that this is a show about somebody in the mid 1800s, I feel so proud. And
Yeah.
I finally feel like justice has been served. And I wish I had this show when I was a kid so I
Yeah.
could see something that represented this time period about my culture, and I could have felt so proud of it that I wanted to stand up and clap, you know?
Oh my goodness. That is so inspiring. And I love what you just said is something that I've said myself, but I also hear it again and again with so many creators, and that is creating the things that you wish you had when you were a child. I saw a TEDx talk with this author, children's author, young people's author, Grace Lynn, and she said the same thing. She's like, I'm making these stories with these, Asian characters who are fun and fantasy and all that. She's like, because I didn't have it, and it's what I wish I had when I was growing up and what it
Yeah.
needs to give. So I think that's really beautiful. I feel connected to this musical in so many ways. One, my great grandmother's name was Minnie. And so that's the mom's name in the show. Yeah. So as soon
Oh,
as I saw that, I was
wow.
like, wow, that's wild. Cause I mean, it's not a super unique name, but you don't hear it very often. So I thought that that was really cool. My children do musical theater, so I I just feel like if they had had an opportunity, or if they do some days have an opportunity to perform in a show like this, like my daughter's been Annie, she's been Matilda. I have my other daughter's Miss Hannigan, and they've done Fiddler on the Roof, and those are all really fun. And I know it's like a rite of passage, and every musical theater kid does those shows,
Yeah.
but there is something um to be said about being a character that is Black, like for originally written as a Black character, because
Yeah.
I'm thankful that they've had opportunities to play all these different roles, but they've never been in a Black musical before. And there's
Yeah.
the music is different, the speech is different, the history is different, the talk is different. And I think that that's beautiful that you are not only that this is a performance that people have been able to see and is actively in show right now, but that you're creating a body of work that could at some point be things that are performed by other people. And there isn't that
Yeah.
much. There's very, very little in that realm for community theater and things like that. So I just think that's
Yeah.
also
You
really
know,
beautiful.
and it is changing, thank God, but also even people who have played roles of Black people and have played enslaved people is again usually traumatic. And so when I put the audition call out, I did have people reach out to me, actors who were like, before I auditioned for this show, can you explain to me what happens? I don't want to play, a downtrodden slave again. And that
Hmm.
really hit me. And even through the rehearsal process, people process things and they learn things about themselves as actors and really appreciate being able to represent people of this time period because, frankly, people were enslaved.
Yeah.
So we can't shy away from that. But
Yeah.
that there was not only a joy and not a fake joy where, like, we're talking about, like, oh, people didn't mind being enslaved. No, that's not
Yeah.
it
No.
either.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that reaction was so
That
visceral.
ain't it. Yeah.
That ain't
That's
it.
like happiness, like giddy happiness. We're not talking about that. Like, I just love being out here, but
Right,
joy that is emanating
right,
from like your internal and from your soul, like your
right,
internal humanity, that you're able
right.
to claim.
And that they had goals and dreams for themselves and hope for a better life, and that better life could be obtained, but that there was risk involved in that. And that's the part of the story that I thought was missing. And I'm so thankful that our actors have clung to that and realize that that's the story I'm trying to tell. And even in the language, even like yeah, I know you were joking, but we see a lot of that, right? Like, oh, I'm a
Yeah.
downtrodden slave, and
Yeah.
like, yes, missile. And I was like trying really hard to honor our language as a culture without
Yes.
putting that stank on it
Yes.
to
Yes.
make sure that the language was appropriate but didn't make us sound like idiots
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
weren't
No,
and
not
we
at
are
all.
not now. Side note, I'm going to send you the video of the
Okay.
show.
Oh
You
my
can see
gosh,
it.
that's so exciting. I'm super excited. I'm super excited. My kids will love that too. So I want to read this part because I think it will help people get another view or a bigger view of what the musical is. So it says highlighting the full range of Black American life and experiences, the narrative and original musical compositions explore themes of optimism, bravery, playfulness, wonder, suspense, and mystery. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm reading this. I was like, okay, this is just, it's all the things we haven't known each other very long. So you haven't interacted with my work a lot, but those are the things I'm always talking about. And I'm like, we want to have suspenseful stories. We want to have a little mystery and intrigue. We want coming of age stories. We want to dig in and have nuance and all of these things. And you're right, it is getting better, but we were so far in the hole that even the, increased amount, we still have a long way to go in terms of having enough of this type of material. So thank you for creating it. I think it's beautiful. And that kind of leads me into, I saved this for last because
Oh
my
wait,
people.
I
Oh,
realized, I'm so sorry. I forgot to answer
yeah.
your question about my roles in the show.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So okay, let's do that.
All right, sorry. So I did create the show and I wrote the music for the show. So I wrote the book and the music. I also directed it, and then I also was the tour manager this time around. And that's too many jobs. So it was exciting, and I learned a lot about myself. And I was really the most afraid of the technical side of it. I'm not technical at all, but I actually, but towards the end of the tour, was even helping to run the soundboard. So I have learned
Wow.
so many skills, but now I have enough skills.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to, I definitely want to see this show grow, and I'm going to write more shows. I do love writing. I actually love directing too. I think tour managing is just one bridge too far for me. But yeah, those are all the roles that I played, and creative producer too. So I just had my teeth right into this thing.
Oh,
It's been
you just
my third baby.
I can see you're not afraid to try new things, right? Because so many of the things you're trying, it's like there's no exact roadmap. You're not like,
Yeah,
okay, I majored in this and then I did this and I got promoted to this and now I'm doing this. And it sounds like in a lot of ways you've kind of forged your own path
yeah,
for the things that kind of make your heart sing,
yeah. I've
which
had a
is so
very
smart.
say yes career,
Yeah.
which has been scary in a lot of ways, but I wouldn't trade it for
Yeah.
anything.
That's so cool. Love it. So what I was gonna say, a lot of the people that'll be watching this video are major bibliophiles. These ladies love books, their kids love books, homeschoolers or not. And so I wanted to talk about where I first heard of you, and that was the Viva Durant series. And it's a whole book series, you guys, award winning. And it says, follow quirky and curious Viva Durant as she visits family in New Orleans and traverses jazz clubs, kitchens, and cemeteries to solve mysteries. So I want two things. I do want you to tell us all about Viva and her awesomeness. But first, I think it's very unique because the series is an Audible series. So this is not like a hardcover book that you're going to open. It's straight to Audible. And I love that. It's a very cool concept. And I would love to know what was behind that decision.
Yeah. So I got the opportunity to do a project with Audible. So it wasn't that I pitched or had the idea to go to straight to Audible, but as a person who's a traditionalist but also has ADHD, I thought that audiobooks were cheating. And
Mm,
I stayed away from them for a really long time. And then I had just gotten into listening to audiobooks, and I was listening to the autobiography of Jennifer Lewis, and it
mm,
was so colorful. And she sang some of the parts, but not that she was singing songs, but rather like it's part of her nature to sing about something instead of say the words. And so she's
yeah.
like, oh, and then I was getting in my car, girl, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I thought I would have missed this if I had read it in print. Not that the print book is not, special in its own right, but audio stories have their own magic. And so I kind of had that in my pocket. And then it happened to be that my manager, Stephanie Mayers, had this opportunity to pitch concepts to Audible because they were looking for original content for young audiences. And so she asked me if I had anything I was working on. And I said, oh, yeah, I've been actually working on this idea for a mystery. And it could work well as an audio story. And so I got to work putting the pitch together, and and then they bought it. And so it's been a really exciting journey with them. And then when I finished my first book, they said, "Oh, we actually want someone else to narrate this." And I was kind of heartbroken, to be honest.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But then I um, I said, well, who do you have in mind? And they said Bonnie Turpin. And Bonnie Turpin was narrating the book I was listening to at that time, which was Colton Whitehead's Underground Railroad. So she
Yes.
has her own following, and she's just
Yes,
this
she does.
incredible powerhouse of as a narrator. And so all the pieces fit together. And because it was audio, I was able to incorporate some of my own music and,
Mm.
create this audio world that was beyond the words, and really just a new way of storytelling. And now, having access to audiobooks, because I work in the audio world and I listen to way more audio stories, it has helped me reclaim my love for reading, because I can be physical while listening and I'm still learning
Yes.
this material. There's definitely something to be said about reading a physical book and learning, especially like language when you're young. Um, and I still hear words in audiobooks where I'm like, what was that word? I have to go look it up in the print now.
Yes.
But really just giving me the opportunity to experience essentially audio theater, is the way I think about it. And so,
Yeah.
it's been really special to create, projects for the ear. And I've had an opportunity to write for other companies, like bedtime stories for companies like Rebel Girls, for example, where it's all about making something specifically for the ear. That's been super exciting. And
Yeah.
again, there's this common theme, right? Like I just really want to celebrate, um, the life of Black folks past and present, and that we have the right to be playful. And there was
Yeah.
something. Oh, you wrote, you had something on your website. If you don't mind me looking at, can I look at it, or is that going to mess up your flow?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I screenshot
No,
it.
not at all.
Let me see if I screenshot it. I did. You had posted like wholesome does not equal white. Ooh, that
Yeah.
that was a quote from someone else, but that resonated with me so hard because I can
Yeah.
so identify with not feeling allowed to be playful. And I remember this podcaster one time, I can't remember who it was, but they were saying like, oh, when you hear Black literature, Black culture featured on television and stuff like that, it's as if we came out the womb being like, oh, girl, I gotta make some dinner for these kids, right? Like we just have this like stress that's associated with being Black and female. And I just like always remember that. Isn't it true, right? And so like the work that
That's
you
true.
do and the work that I do is all about like dismantling that and having the being okay with
Yeah.
being playful. And so the Viva series in a nutshell, and I don't want to give anything away, but it's about this little Black girl and she visits her family and her grandmother in New Orleans during summers and holidays. And when she goes there, she solves mysteries while she's there. And it's just a really playful way to like go through the streets of New Orleans. And New Orleans, it's always been, as you can see, a really uh, great microcosm of inspiration for me because it's just like this really unique place with all this incredible history, and architecture is fascinating and the food is unique and it just lends itself to storytelling. Um, and so it's been really fun to put Viva through this world. And in the note of like wholesome or white doesn't necessarily equal wholesome, I'll say that again. In the idea that white does not necessarily equal wholesome, some of my reviews have been by Black folks saying, why does she think she can run around the streets of New Orleans? That's dangerous. Like, doesn't she know she can need to go back inside? That kind of thing. And I think about it, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, how many storylines do we have about a little white kid running around the streets of New York? That is
Yeah.
not safe.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
yet, it's a
No.
story. It's
Or
playful.
spending the night in the museum or, following some tunnel down a thing to figure out the mystery of the day. I mean, yeah, it's
Exactly.
believable within that context, and it should be believable within ours too. I mean, we both are mothers, we both have kids, and kids of all sorts. I don't care who you are. They like to play. They like to investigate. They're
Yeah.
inquisitive. They're curious. They want to have fun. So I think that, yeah, I reject that.
I reject that
That
too. So
idea.
much, in fact, that I write about it. And so it's been really fun. And I grew up in California and visited family in the summers and stuff when I was a kid. And it was very much like Viva's grandmother in the first book, where she's like, oh no, we don't go to the French Quarter. That's for white folks. That's for
Yeah.
tourists. Like, we don't do that. And
Yeah.
so growing up visiting New Orleans, I just thought about it like it could have been any other small town in the South. I didn't know it
Sure.
was special because we just
Yeah.
stayed at family's house and we don't play in the streets and
Yeah.
we don't go explore. And so it's been really fun to reimagine my own childhood through Viva and going to all these places. And in doing research for these books, I've also gone to New Orleans myself and gone as a tourist and as an explorer and gone to all these nook and crannies and learned these things and gone on tours and going to museums. And I'm like, this is a fascinating place that
Yeah.
belongs to us that we don't even allow ourselves to explore for many already mentioned reasons.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's been really fun to just allow Viva to play, you know?
Yeah. Well, you talked about audiobooks. So I used to be like hard copy or bust. I gotta hold it, I gotta turn the pages. And I do still love that. But in this season of my life, I would say I'm a prolific reader, if that's the right word for it, but most of it is audiobooks, or at least half of it, because I'm listening in the car, I'm listening while I comb through this stuff after I finish washing or
Yep.
while I'm washing dishes. And also like even this most like the simplest things, I wake up really early or kind of in the middle of the night, like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, multiple nights a week for no apparent reason. I have no idea.
Oh
It's really
no.
terrible. I know, I hate it. But I don't like to get out of bed because then I know I ruin any chance I have of trying to go back to sleep. And so I have like little earpieces right up on my nightstand and I pop them in and I listen to it in the dark, like in the wee hours. And so
Yeah.
I love audiobooks. And you're talking about that it's really kind of like an experience, right? It's experiential to listen to audiobooks, especially when there's music. And I mean, and Bonnie Turpin, I mean, come on, she's like, if she's the only audiobook narrator I can name by name, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's really great. But I was going to mention, I listened to this audiobook by Elaine Welteroth. She's like I think she was a TV host, but she was like a magazine editor. And anyway, in the book, her actual mom and dad, like if she says, and then my dad said her dad's voice comes on. So she had them in the recording studio
Oh,
with her and recording all of their own parts. And part of her story was her parents are interracial couple. And so, she's got her mom and daddy on talking in their own voices. And that added something to that
yes.
book. That was an example of where you would not have gotten that coming across
Right.
from just reading it. So
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
I
It's a
just
neat.
started listening to Harry Belafonte's biography, and he doesn't do the whole book because he was quite old when they put it together. But he does like the first couple of chapters. To hear
Mhm.
him talk about his own experience running from cops during the civil rights movement with
Yeah.
Sidney Poitier and like sharing a bed with him and them fighting and cursing at each other, and you're like, this would not have been the same if you hadn't heard this out of Harry Belafonte's mouth with that like
No.
beautiful rasp that came to him when he was
Yeah.
older. And you're just
Yeah.
like, did Harry Belafonte just say that word?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Like it's really kind of magical.
Yeah.
And it makes it to me, it's, especially my book series, it kind of points back to the world of radio dramas where we get to put in
Oh,
little sound
yes.
effects and things like that. And it's just a really playful way to experience story.
Yeah, and it's if you ever get a chance, let's see, Their Eyes Were Watching God, the Zora Neale Hurston book. The audiobook is Ruby Dee, and
Uh-huh.
she tears that up. That is just I'm like, I'll sit here and listen to this all day and all
Yes.
night. So, so good. So
I'm halfway through Hurston's book Mules and Men,
yes.
which is
That's so much
also
related to your work. It's
yes,
so oh wow. Yeah.
definitely not for children.
Yes, not for children. That
So
is
let's not
not a kid's book. Yeah.
right, not safe for work, not safe for kids. I was like, these stories are hilarious. I cannot include them in my show. Like, I just,
You know
but
what's funny
also
though? It's still related to what you're doing because she went back and she's like in, I think, Eatonville, Florida, or where she
yes,
was going back and she's capturing these stories and she's retelling them. I mean, this is for adults, but you are doing that same work, the Ordinary Folks
yeah,
Project and even just the playground songs and everything. You are sifting through a body of work that some people would say is old and stodgy and kind of forgotten and who cares, and you're bringing that forward with a new in a new way. So I see when you were talking about that, you tripped up over a word and I can't remember what the word was, but I was thinking you were going to say anthropologist
that
because
was the word I was looking for.
okay, good, because that's what
Thank
I was
you.
like. I was like, yes, that's I see that anthropological take on your work, um and And yes, it's you're a performer and you're performing, but you're not just only performing something that's already existing. You're going back and finding and pushing things forward. And I saw the parallels between that and Zora.
Yeah.
So the fact that you said you're listening to that book, I was
Well,
like, yeah,
actually, that's why I was listening because of the project I'm working on, and I was trying to see if there were stories that I could borrow from her research, but they are
yeah,
not, like I said, for children, but still really fascinating to see the way in which they were told to her and the way that she shares them
yes,
with others. And also just reminds me of how playful we are as a people. And
yes,
again, some of those stories are just plain old adult, but some of them I can't share because they are really based in trauma. And there was one that was literally about a black man being threatened with being hung, and
yeah,
it was hilarious. And I'm like, how do we make this funny? And this is a
yeah,
story that was like at its time already probably 50 to 100 years, so we're talking about a folk tale that was had with a punchline from like
yeah,
the mid 1800s or earlier. And we're like, wow, we really had a fascinating ability and continue to have this ability to take what has happened to us and punch it back in the face with
yeah,
humor. And
yeah.
I find that so remarkable.
And I think sometimes too, because I've even done this before. I'll be talking about something like, "Why are you laughing?" Like, that's something
Yeah.
that's not good. And I'm just like, sometimes you laugh to keep from crying. And
Yeah.
so, there's always that aspect too, or you're just kind of like there, you feel emotional and you're just choosing to laugh at yourself or to make light of this, not in a unhealthy way, but just like it's almost like taking control back of what this has done to you or what this is doing to you. Like I'm taking that, I'm capturing that, and I'm actually going to choose to see there is a little bit of funny to it. And I'm going to make it, that so that I can hold it. Like that might
Yeah.
be the only way I can hold this story.
Hmm.
So I think that's really, really beautiful. Well, um, I would like to know if you have, before we wrap up, if you have any, I hate when people ask me this question, so I can't believe I'm about to do it to you, but do you have any projects that you're working on that you're ready to talk about? 'Cause I'm like, I'm always working on something, but I wasn't ready to announce that yet.
Yeah. Well, North is still on tour. It has two more stops in Arkansas at the Walton Center for the Arts and the Reynolds. Let me get it right. My friends at Reynolds. Let me get it right. Uh,
You guys, and
Reynolds
I'll have
Performing.
links to people
I'll
watching.
fix
I'll have
it.
links to all the websites and all the things that she's a part of, on the
Yes.
post as well.
Um, sorry about that. So, North is still on tour. It has dates at the end of April and the beginning of May in Arkansas. Both of the dates are in Arkansas at the Walton Center for the Arts and the Reynolds Performance Hall. And then this tour wraps. So, if you get yourself to Arkansas, that's where you're going to see it. My third book in the Viva Durant series has just released a little while ago. So, that is Viva Durant and the Mystery at the Masquerade Ball, which is only available on Audible. And that's what's cooking out in the ethers right now. I'm definitely working on some secrety things down below,
Yes.
but that's what I'm
Okay.
really excited about. So,
I love that so much. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to me, for the opportunity to, what I hope is, introduce your work to an entirely new audience of people that may not have been familiar with it. But you have big fans already here in Atlanta, and I look forward to spreading it. I already have the new book, so I'm in the know there. And yeah, anytime you would like to pop back and share more about what you're doing, we're always here. But in the meantime, good luck with everything. And we're cheering you on. And thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of all of our children.
oh, thank you so much for this. This has been really edifying for me. So, appreciate it.
You're welcome.